Hello, this is Lance Cleveland. Today I'm going to talk about Store Locator Plus and why it is important to have all your JavaScript that is running on your public pages, especially the one with the locator map, working correctly. We get a lot of questions and reports of issues when people upgrade Store Locator Plus saying that the locator has stopped working. A lot of times we find that not only did they update the locator, they updated a dozen other plugins, themes, WordPress, and any number of other elements on their site at the same time. Sometimes they even have auto update turned on, so they may not even know that a plugin has updated and has broken their search. So, of course, our plugin's not always infallible. We do have bugs that come up from time to time, but more often than not, we find that if most of the locator is working, but one of the features stops working, it's because JavaScript is not loading completely. So I'll show you a little bit about why that is and how it works. So today we have a report from a customer that says that that their locator isn't working when they search new locations. And one of the things I first noticed when I go to their site is the built-in Google Maps interfaces, these zoom buttons and the stickman and all this stuff are not working. So that's a pretty clear indicator that the problem is not in the locator plugin, it is Google code not working. So one of the reasons why the JavaScript has to work on the entire site, and if I pull up the console, I'm using, this is the Firefox browser here, I can actually see that they have errors. Now the problem is if there are any errors like this, especially fatal errors that have these X's, anything that is an actual error, not a warning, all the JavaScript on the page from that point on typically will not run at all, or it's running incorrectly because the memory inside of JavaScript is corrupted and all sorts of funky things start to happen. So in this case, the reason the search is not working is because they have two components that are completely broken. That means it never gets to the Store Locator Plus code. Okay, so why is that? And one of the things people ask is, why don't you just run your code first? So a little quick code lesson here. You don't really need to know code, but when WordPress or any web app loads JavaScript, it loads it up in an indeterminate order. That means we cannot decide which runs first, second, or third. And if you really think about it, you can see here in this little snippet of code, there's a little bit of JavaScript code that starts, and at the very bottom, this little piece of code here is pretty typical for most JavaScript pieces these days. And basically it says when the entire web page is done running, saying the document is ready, then run our app. Of course, if we told ours to run first, every other person that has a plugin would tell theirs to run first as well. So which one do you run? So you really can't decide what runs first. And because of that, we can't tell if Store Locator Plus is going to run first, second, third, fourth. We cannot tell. If we actually take a look at the source code on this particular site, you can kind of see how it gets built behind the scenes. So, here's all the stuff that loads on the page, and we can see one of the first scripts that loads is a non-locator script. Not sure what this does, something about setting cookies, does this Thomas Google reCAPTCHA thing. So there's other things that are happening. It calls the Google reCAPTCHA library, which I'm sure is okay. They're pretty good at testing their code. It gets down a good ways. It passes data in for this data tables thing, adds some CSS, which isn't going to affect how it runs. And then finally, does the editor and public. Look at all the script that runs before it gets to the Store Locator Plus code way down here. That means all these scripts up here have to have no bugs. If they have bugs, it affects every other program in the stack, which is what's happening in this case. We end up running, 15th or 16th in the stack if anything breaks before it. In this case, there's a bad piece of reCAPTCHA code in that Thomas one. And also there's a bad piece of code inside of this RHS hide. Both of those are breaking, and guess what? It never even runs our code. Once that happens, all the interfaces and functionality is broken. So that's part of what goes on behind the scenes. One of the best ways you can check your site when you update things and your map stops working is to find your developer tools. It's in Firefox under Tools, Web Developer. In Safari, there's a thing called Develop that you have to turn on in Preferences, and it's show JavaScript console. But all modern browsers will have a way to bring up the web console and see any errors that are being thrown by the JavaScript code. So there you have it. You have a little bit more understanding of what's going on behind the scenes technically and why it is critical to check that all your JavaScript is running correctly. If you're having issues with Store Locator Plus, of course, you can always ask us, shoot us an email via our contact form at storelocatorplus.com. You'll find the link on the top and bottom of the pages. And you can ask us and we'll look at it and often report back what we find. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting Store Locator Plus. Have a good one.